Hey guys, it's Relaxing Whisper, and today I'm going to be doing another soft-spoken reading video. I'm going to be reading a book called Welcome to Dead House by R.L. Stine. It's a Goosebumps book, and I'm going to be reading chapters 11 through 15. Chapter 11. Several days went by. Josh and I were getting used to our new house and our new friends. The kids we met every day at the playground weren't exactly friends yet. They talked with Josh and me and let us on their teams, but it was really hard to get to know them. In my room, I kept hearing whispers late at night and soft giggling, but I forced myself to ignore it. One night, I thought I saw a girl dressed in all white at the end of the upstairs hall, but when I walked over to investigate, there was just a pile of dirty sheets and other bedclothes against the wall. Josh and I were adjusting, but Petey was still acting really strange. We took him with us to the playground every day, but we had to leash him to the fence. Otherwise, he'd bark and snap at all the kids. He's still nervous being in a new place, I told Josh. He'll calm down. But Petey didn't calm down. And about 2 weeks later, we were finishing up a softball game with Ray and Karen Somerset and Jerry Franklin and George Carpenter and a bunch of other kids, when I looked over to the fence and saw that Petey was gone. Somehow, he had broken out of his leash and run away. We looked for hours, calling Petey, wandering from block to block, searching front yards and backyards, empty lots and woods. Then, after circling the neighborhood twice, Josh and I suddenly realized we had no idea where we were. The streets of Dark Falls looked the same. They were all lined with sprawling old brick or shingle houses, all filled with shady old trees. I don't believe it. We're lost, Josh said, leaning against a tree trunk, trying to catch his breath. That stupid dog, I muttered, my eyes searching up the street. Why did he do this? He's never run away before. I don't know how he got loose, Josh said, shaking his head, then wiping his sweaty forehead with the sleeve of his t-shirt. I tied him up really well. Hey, maybe he ran home, I said. The idea immediately cheered me up. Yeah, Josh stepped away from the tree and headed back over to me. I'll bet you're right, Amanda. He's probably been home for hours. Wow, we've been stupid. We should have checked home first. Let's go. Well, I said, looking around at the empty yards, we'll just have to figure out which way home is. I looked up and down the street, trying to figure out which way we turned when we left the school playground. I couldn't remember, so we just started walking. Luckily, as we reached the next corner, the school came into sight. We made a full circle. It was easy to find our way from there. Passing the playground, I stared at the spot on the fence where Petey had been tied. That troublemaking dog. He'd been acting so badly ever since we came to Dark Falls. Would he come home when we got there? Or would he be home when we got there? I hoped so. A few minutes later, Josh and I were running up the gravel driveway, calling the dog's name at the top of our lungs. The front door burst open, and Mom, her hair tied in a red bandana, the knees of her jeans covered in dust, leaned out. She and Dad had been painting the back porch. "Where have you two been? Lunchtime was 2 hours ago." Josh and I both answered at the same time. "Is Petey here? We've been looking for Petey. Is he here?" Mom's face filled with confusion. "Petey? I thought he was with you." My heart sank. Josh slumped to the driveway with a loud sigh, sprawling flat on his back in the gravel and the leaves. "You haven't seen him?" I asked, my trembling voice showing my disappointment. "He was with us, but he ran away." "Oh, I'm sorry," Mom said, motioning for Josh to get up from the driveway. "He ran away? I thought you've been keeping him on a leash." "You've got to help us find him," Josh pleaded, not budging from the ground. "Get the car. We've got to find him right now." "I'm sure he hasn't gotten far," Mom said. "You must be starving. Come in and have some lunch, and then we'll—" "No, right now!" Josh screamed. "What's going on?" Dad, his face covered with tiny flecks of white paint, joined Mom on the front porch. "Josh, what's all the yelling?" We explained to Dad what had happened. He said he was too busy to drive around looking for Petey. Mom said she'd do it, but only after we had some lunch. I pulled Josh up by both arms and dragged him into the house. We washed up and gulped down some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Then Mom took the car out of the garage, and we drove around and around the neighborhood, searching for our lost pet. With no luck. No sign of him. Josh and I were miserable, heartbroken. Mom and Dad called the local police. Dad kept saying that Petey had a good sense of direction, that he'd show up at any minute, but we didn't really believe it. Where was he? The four of us ate dinner in silence. It was the longest, most horrible evening of my life. "I tied him up really good," Josh repeated, close to tears, his dinner plate still full. "Dogs are great escape artists," Dad said. "Don't worry, he'll show up." "Some night for a party," Mom said glumly. I'd completely forgotten that they were going out. Some neighbors on the next block had invited them to a big potluck dinner party. "I sure don't feel like partying either," Dad said with a sigh. "I'm beat from painting all day, but I guess we have to be neighborly." "Sure you kids are okay here?" "Yeah, I guess," I said, thinking about Petey. I kept listening for his bark, listening for his scratching at the door. But no. The hours dragged by. Petey still hadn't shown up by bedtime. Josh and I both slinked upstairs. I felt really tired, weary from all the worrying and the running around and searching for Petey, I guess. But I knew I'd never be able to get to sleep. The hall outside my bedroom door, I heard whispering from inside my room and quiet footsteps, the usual sounds my room made. I wasn't at all scared of them or surprised by them anymore. Without hesitating, I stepped into my room and clicked on the light. The room was empty, and I knew it would be. The mysterious sounds disappeared. I glanced at the curtains, which lay still, straight and still. Then I saw the clothes strewn all over my bed. Several pairs of jeans, several t-shirts, a couple of sweatshirts, my only dress-up shirt. That's strange, I thought. Mom was such a neat freak. If she had washed these things, she surely would have hung them up or put them into the dresser drawers. Sighing wearily, I started to gather up the clothes and put them away. I figured that Mom simply had too much to do to be bothered. She had probably washed the stuff and then left it here for me to put away. Or she had put it all down, planning to come back later and put it away, and then got busy with other chores. Half an hour later, I was tucked into my bed, wide awake, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Sometime after that, I lost track of the time. I was still wide awake, thinking about Petey, thinking about the new kids I'd met, thinking about the new neighborhood, when I heard my bedroom door creak and swing open, footsteps on the creaking floorboards. I sat up in the darkness as someone crept into my room. "Amanda, shh, it's me." Alarmed, it took me a few seconds to recognize the hushed whisper. "Josh, what do you want? What are you doing in here?" I gasped as a blinding light forced me to cover my eyes. "Oops, sorry," Josh said. "My flashlight. I didn't mean to." "Ow, that's bright," I said, blinking. He aimed the powerful beam of white light up at the ceiling. "Yeah, it's a halogen flashlight," he said. "Well, what do you want?" I asked irritably. I still couldn't see well. I rubbed my eyes, but it didn't help. "I know where Petey is," Josh whispered, "and I'm going to go get him. Come with me?" "Huh?" I looked at the little clock on my bed table. "It's after midnight, Josh." "So? It won't take long, really." My eyes were nearly normal by now, staring at Josh in the light from the halogen flashlight. I noticed for the first time that he was fully dressed in jeans and a long-sleeved t-shirt. "I don't get it, Josh," I said, swinging around and putting my feet on the floor. "We looked everywhere. Where do you think Petey is?" "In the cemetery," Josh answered. His eyes looked big and dark and serious in the white light. "Huh?" "That's where he ran the first time, remember? When we first came to Dark Falls? He ran to that cemetery just past the school." "Now, wait a minute," I started. "We drove past it this afternoon, but we didn't look inside. He's there, Amanda, I know he is. And I'm going to go get him whether you come or not." "Josh, calm down," I said, putting my hands on his narrow shoulders. I was surprised to discover that he was trembling. "There's no reason for Petey to be in that cemetery. That's where he went the first time," Josh insisted. "He was looking for something there that day. I could tell. I know he's there again, Amanda." He pulled away from me. "Are you coming or not?" My brother has to be the stubbornest, most headstrong person in the world. "Josh, you're really going to walk into a strange cemetery so late at night?" I asked. "I'm not afraid," he said, shining the bright light around the room. For a brief second, I thought the light caught someone lurking behind the curtains. I opened my mouth to cry out, but there was no one there. "You coming or not?" he repeated impatiently. I was going to say no, but then, glancing at the curtains, I thought, it's probably no more spooky out there in that cemetery than it is here in my own bedroom. "Yeah, okay," I said grudgingly. "Get out of here and let me get dressed." "Okay," he whispered, turning off the flashlight, plunging us into blackness. "Meet me downstairs at the end of the driveway." "Josh, one quick look at the cemetery, then we hurry home, got it?" I told him. "Yeah, right. We'll be home before Mom and Dad get back from that party." He crept out. I could hear him making his way quickly down the stairs. This is the craziest idea ever, I told myself as I searched in the darkness for some clothes to pull on. And it was also kind of exciting. Josh was wrong, no doubt about it. Petey wouldn't be hanging around in that cemetery now. Why on earth should he? But at least it wasn't a long walk, and it was an adventure, something to write about to Kathy back home. And if Josh happened to be right, and we did manage to find poor lost Petey, well, that would be great too. A few minutes later, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, I crept out of the house and joined Josh at the bottom of the driveway. The night was still warm. A heavy blanket of clouds covered the moon. I realized for the first time that there were no streetlights on our block. Josh had the halogen flashlight on, aimed down at our feet. "You ready?" he asked. Dumb question. Would I be standing there if I weren't ready? We crunched over dead leaves as we headed up the block towards the school. From there was just 2 blocks to the cemetery. "It's so dark," I whispered. The houses were black and silent. There was no breeze at all. It was as if we were all alone in the world. "It's too quiet," I said, hurrying to keep up with Josh. "No crickets or anything. Are you sure you really want to go to the cemetery?" "I'm sure," he said, his eyes following the circle of light from the flashlight as it bumped over the ground. "I really think Petey is there." We walked in the street, keeping close to the curb. We had gone nearly 2 blocks. The school was just coming into sight on the next block when we heard the scraping steps behind us on the pavement. Josh and I both stopped. He lowered the light. We both heard the sounds. I wasn't imagining them. Someone was following us. Chapter 12. Josh was so startled. The flashlight tumbled from his hand and clattered onto the street. The light flickered but didn't go out. By the time Josh had managed to pick it up, our pursuer had caught up to us. I spun around to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ray, what are you doing here?" Josh aimed the light at Ray's face, but Ray shot his arms up to shield his face and ducked back into the darkness. "What are you two doing here?" he cried, sounding almost as startled as I did. You scared us," Josh said angrily, aiming the flashlight back down at our feet. "Sorry," Ray said. "I would have called out, but I wasn't sure it was you." "Josh has this crazy idea about where Petey might be," I told him, still struggling to catch my breath. "That's why we're out here." "What about you?" Josh asked Ray. "Well, sometimes I have trouble sleeping," Ray said softly. "Don't your parents mind you being out so late?" I asked. In the glow from the flashlight, I could see a wicked smile across his face. "They don't know." "Are we going to the cemetery or not?" Josh asked impatiently. Without waiting for an answer, he started jogging up the road, the light bobbing on the pavement in front of him. I turned and followed, wanting to stay close to the light. "Where are you going?" Ray called, hurrying to catch up. "The cemetery," I called back. "No," Ray said, "you're not." His voice was so low, so threatening that I had stopped. "What?" "You're not going there," Ray repeated. I couldn't see his face. It was hidden in darkness, but his words sounded menacing. "Hurry," Josh called back to us. He hadn't slowed down. He didn't seem to notice the threat in Ray's words. "Stop, Josh," Ray called. It sounded more like an order than a request. "You can't go there." "Why not?" I demanded, suddenly afraid. Was Ray threatening Josh and me? Did he know something we didn't? Or was I making a big deal out of nothing once again? I stared into the darkness, trying to see his face. "You'd be nuts to go there at night," he declared. I began to think I was misjudging him. He was afraid to go there. That's why he was trying to stop us. "Are you coming or not?" Josh demanded, getting farther and farther ahead of us. "I don't think we should," Ray warned. Yes, he's afraid, I decided. I only imagined that he was threatening us. "You don't have to, but we do," Josh insisted, picking up his speed. "No, really," Ray said. This is a bad idea." But now he and I were running side by side to catch up with Josh. "Petey's there," Josh said. "I know he is." We passed the dark, silent school. It seemed much bigger at night. Josh's light flashed through the low tree branches as we turned the corner onto Cemetery Drive. "Wait, please," Ray pleaded. But Josh didn't slow down. Neither did I. I was eager to get there and get it over with. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve. The air was hot and still. I wished I hadn't worn long sleeves. I felt my hair. It was dripping wet. The clouds still covered the moon as we reached the cemetery. We stepped through a gate in the low wall. In the darkness, I could see the crooked rows of gravestones. Josh's light traveled from stone to stone, jumping up and down as he walked. "Petey," he called, suddenly interrupting the silence. "He's disturbing the sleep of the dead," I thought, feeling a sudden chill of fear. "Don't be silly, Amanda." "Petey," I called too, forcing away my morbid thoughts. "This is a very bad idea," Ray said, standing very close to me. "Petey, Petey," Josh called. "I know it's a bad idea," I admitted to Ray, but I didn't want Josh to come here by himself. "But we shouldn't be here," Ray insisted. I was beginning to wish he'd go away. No one had forced him to come. Why was he giving us such a hard time? "Hey, look at this," Josh called from several yards up ahead. My sneakers crunching over the soft ground, I hurried between the rows of graves. I hadn't realized that we had already walked the entire length of the graveyard. "Look," Josh said again, his flashlight playing over a strange structure built at the edge of the cemetery. It took me a little while to figure out what it was in the small circle of light. It was so unexpected. It was some kind of theater, an amphitheater, I guess you'd call it. Circular rows of benched seating dug into the ground, descending like stairs into a low, stage-like platform at the bottom. "What on earth?" I exclaimed. I started forward to get a closer look. "Amanda, wait. Let's go home," Ray called. He grabbed at my arm, but I hurried away, and he grabbed only air. Weird. Who would build an outdoor theater at the edge of a cemetery? I asked. I looked back to see if Josh and Ray were following me, and my sneaker caught against something. I stumbled to the ground, hitting my knee hard. Ow, what was that? Josh shone the light on it as I climbed slowly, painfully to my feet. I had tripped over an enormous, upraised tree root. In the flickering light, I followed the gnarled root over to a wide old tree several yards away. The huge tree was bent over the strange below-ground theater, leaning at such a low angle that it looked likely to topple over at any second. Big clumps of roots were raised from the ground. Overhead, the tree's branches, heavy with leaves, seemed to lean to the ground. "Timber!" Josh yelled. "How weird," I exclaimed. "Hey, Ray, what is this place?" "It's a meeting place," Ray said quietly, standing close behind me, staring straight ahead at the leaning tree. "They use it sort of like a town hall. They have town meetings here." "In the cemetery?" I cried, finding it hard to believe. "Let's go," Ray urged, looking very nervous. All three of us heard the footsteps. They were behind us, somewhere in the rows of graves. We turned around. Josh's light swept over the ground. "Petey!" There he was, standing between the nearest row of low stone grave markers. I turned happily to Josh. "I don't believe it," I cried. "You were right." "Petey! Petey!" Josh and I both started running toward our dog, but Percy arched back on his hind legs as if he were getting ready to run away. He stared at us, his eyes red as jewels in the light of the flashlight. "Petey, we found you!" I cried. The dog lowered his head and started to trot away. "Petey, hey, come back. Don't you recognize us?" With a burst of speed, Josh caught up with him and grabbed him off the ground. "Hey, Petey, what's the matter, fella?" As I hurried over, Josh dropped Petey back to the ground and stepped back. "Oh, he stinks." "What?" I cried. "Petey, he stinks. He smells like a dead rat." Josh held his nose. Petey started to walk away slowly. "Josh, he isn't glad to see us," I wailed. "He doesn't even seem to recognize us. Look at him." It was true. Petey walked to the next row of gravestones, then turned and glared at us. I suddenly felt sick. What had happened to Petey? Why was he acting so differently? Why wasn't he glad to see us? "I don't get it," Josh said, still making a face from the odor the dog gave off. "Usually if we leave the room for 30 seconds, he goes nuts when we come back." "We'd better go," Ray called. He was still at the edge of the cemetery, near the leaning tree. "Petey, what's wrong with you?" I called to the dog. He didn't respond. "Don't you remember your name? Petey? Petey?" "Yuck, what a stink," Josh exclaimed. "We've got to get him home and give him a bath," I said. My voice was shaking. I felt really sad and frightened. "Maybe this isn't Petey," Josh said thoughtfully. The dog's eyes again glared red in the beam of the light. "It's him, all right," I said quietly. "Look, he's dragging the leash. Go get him, Josh, and let's go home." "You get him," Josh cried. "He smells too bad." "Just grab his leash. You don't have to pick him up," I said. "No, you." Josh was being stubborn again. I could see that I had no choice. "Okay," I said. "I'll get him. but I'll need the light. I grabbed the flashlight from Josh's hand and started to run toward Petey. Sit, Petey, sit, I ordered. It was the only command Petey ever obeyed, but he didn't obey it this time. Instead, he turned and trotted away, holding his head down low. Petey, stop. Petey, come on, I yelled, exasperated. Don't make me chase you. Don't let him get away, Josh yelled, running up behind me. I moved the flashlight from side to side along the ground. Where is he? Petey? Petey? Josh called, sounding shrill and desperate. I couldn't see him. Oh no, don't tell me we've lost him again, I said. We both started to call him. What's wrong with that mutt? I cried. I moved the beam of light down one row of gravestones, then, moving quickly down the next. No sign of him. We both kept calling his name, and then the circle of light came to rest on the front of a granite tombstone. Reading the name on the stone, I stopped short and gasped. Josh, look. I grabbed Josh's sleeves. I held on tight. Huh? What's wrong? His face filled with confusion. Look, the name on the gravestone. It was Karen Somerset. Josh read the name. He stared at me, still confused. That's my new friend, Karen. The one I talk to on the playground every day, I said. Huh. It must be her grandmother or something, Josh said. And then he added impatiently, Come on, look for Petey. No, look at the dates, I said to him. We both read the dates under Karen Somerset's name. 1960 through 1972. It can't be her grandmother, I said, keeping the beam of light on the stone despite my trembling hand. This girl died when she was 12, my age, and Karen is 12 too. She told me. Amanda, Josh scowled and looked away. But I took a few steps and beamed the light onto the next gravestone. There was a name on it I'd never heard before. I moved it to the next stone, another name I'd never heard. Amanda, come on, Josh whined. The next gravestone had the name George Carpenter on it, 1975 through 1988. Josh, look. It's George from the playground, I called. Amanda, we have to get Petey, he insisted. But I couldn't pull myself away from the gravestones. I went from one to the next, moving the flashlight over the engraved letters. To my horror, I found Jerry Franklin and then Bill Gregory, all the kids we had played softball with. They all had gravestones here. My heart thudding, I moved down the crooked row, my sneakers sinking into the soft grass. I felt numb with fear. I struggled to hold the light steady as I beamed it onto the last stone in the row. Ray Thurston, 1977 through 1988. Huh? I could hear Josh calling me, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. The rest of the world seemed to fall away. I read the deeply etched inscription again. Ray Thurston, 1977 through 1988. I stood there, staring at the letters and numbers. I stared at them till they didn't make sense anymore, until they were just a gray blur. Suddenly, I realized that Ray had crept up behind me, or beside the gravestone, and was staring at me. Ray, I managed to say, moving the light over the name on the stone. Ray, this one is you. His eyes flared, glowing like dying embers. "Yes, it's me," he said softly, moving toward me. "I'm so sorry, Amanda." Chapter 13. I took a step back, my sneakers sinking into the soft ground. The air was heavy and still. No one made a sound. Nothing moved. Dead. I'm surrounded by death, I thought. Then, frozen to the spot, unable to breathe, the darkness swirling around me, the gravestones spinning in their own black shadows, I thought, what is he going to do to me? "Ray," I managed to call out. My voice sounded faint and far away. "Ray, are you really dead?" "I'm sorry, you weren't supposed to find out yet," he said, his voice floating low and heavy on the stifling night air. "But how? I mean, I don't understand." I looked past him to the darting white light of the flashlight. Josh was several rows away, almost to the street, still searching for Petey. "Petey," I whispered, dread choking my throat, my stomach tightening in horror. "Dogs always know," Ray said in a low, flat tone. "Dogs always recognize the living dead. That's why they have to go first. They always know." "You mean Petey's dead?" I choked out the words. Ray nodded. "They kill the dogs first." "No!" I screamed and took another step back, nearly losing my balance as I bumped into a low marble gravestone. I jumped away from it. "You weren't supposed to see this," Ray said, his narrow face expressionless, except for his dark eyes, which revealed real sadness. "You weren't supposed to know. Not for another few weeks, anyway. I'm the watcher. I was supposed to watch, to make sure you didn't see until it was time." He took a step toward me, his eyes lighting up, red, burning into mine. "Were you watching me from the window?" I cried. "Was that you in my room?" And he nodded yes. "I used to live in your house," he said, taking another step closer, forcing me back against the cold marble stone. "I'm the watcher." I forced myself to look away, to stop staring into his glowing eyes. I wanted to scream to Josh to run and get help, but he was too far away, and I was frozen there, frozen with fear. We need fresh blood," Ray said. "What?" I cried. "What are you saying?" "The town, it can't survive without fresh blood. None of us can. You'll understand soon, Amanda. You'll understand why we had to invite you to the house, to the dead house." In the darting, zigzagging beam of light, I could see Josh moving closer, heading our way. "Run, Josh," I thought. "Run away. Fast. Get someone. Get anyone." I could think the words. Why couldn't I scream them? Ray's eyes glowed brighter. He was standing right in front of me now, his features set, hard and cold. "Ray?" Even through my jeans, the marble gravestone felt cold against the back of my legs. "I messed up," he whispered. "I was the watcher, but I messed up. Ray, what are you going to do?" His red eyes flickered. "I'm really sorry." He started to raise himself off the ground, to float over me. I could feel myself start to choke. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I opened my mouth to call out to Josh, but no sound came out. Josh, where was he? I looked down the rows of gravestones, but couldn't see his light. Ray floated up a little higher. He hovered over me, choking me somehow, blinding me, suffocating me. I'm dead, I thought. Dead. Now I'm dead too. Chapter 14. And then, suddenly, light broke through the darkness. The light shone in Ray's face, the bright white halogen light. What's going on? Josh asked in a high-pitched, nervous voice. Amanda, what's happening? Ray cried out and dropped back to the ground. Turn that off! Turn it off! He screeched, his voice a shrill whisper, like wind through a broken window pane. But Josh held the bright beam on Ray. What's going on? What are you doing? I could breathe again. As I stared into the light, I struggled to stop my heart from pounding so hard. Ray moved his hands to shield himself from the light, but I could see what was happening to him. The light had already done its damage. Ray's skin seemed to be melting. His whole face sagged, then fell, dropping off his skull. I stared into the circle of white light, unable to look away as Ray's skin folded and drooped and melted away. As bone underneath was revealed, his eyes rolled out of their sockets and fell silently to the ground. Josh, frozen in fear, somehow held the bright light steady, and we both stared at the grinning skull, its dark craters staring back at us. Oh, I shrieked as Ray took a step toward me. But then I realized that Ray wasn't walking. He was falling. I jumped aside as he crumpled to the ground and gasped as his skull hit the top of the marble gravestone and cracked open with a sickening splat. Come on, Josh shouted. Amanda, come on. He grabbed my hand and tried to pull me away, but I couldn't stop staring down at Ray, now a pile of bones inside a puddle of crumpled clothes. Amanda, come on. Then, before I even realized it, I was running beside Josh as fast as I could down the long row of graves toward the street. The light flashed against the blur of gravestones as we ran, slipping on the soft, dew-covered grass, gasping in the still, hot air. We've got to tell Mom and Dad. Got to get away from here, I cried. They won't believe it, Josh said as we reached the street. We kept running, our sneakers thudding hard against the pavement. I'm not sure I believe it myself. They've got to believe us, I told him. If they don't, we'll drag them out of that house. The white beam of light pointed the way as we ran through the dark, silent streets. There were no street lights, no lights on in the windows of the house as we passed, no car headlights. Such a dark world we had entered, and now it was time to get out. We ran the rest of the way home. I kept looking back to see if we were being followed, but I didn't see anyone. The neighborhood was still and empty. I had a sharp pain in my side as we reached home, but I forced myself to keep running up the gravel driveway with its thick blanket of dead leaves and onto the front porch. I pushed the door and both Josh and I started to scream, "Mom! Dad! Where are you?" Silence. We ran into the living room. The lights were all off. "Mom? Dad? Are you here?" Please be here, I thought, my heart racing, the pain in my side still sharp. Please be here. We searched the house. They weren't home. The potluck party, Josh suddenly remembered. Can they still be at that party? We were standing in the living room, both of us breathing hard. The pain in my side had let up just a bit. I had turned on all the lights, but the room still felt gloomy and menacing. I glanced at the clock on the mantel. Nearly 2 in the morning. "They should be home by now," I said, my voice shaky and weak. "Where did they go? Did they leave a number?" Josh was already on his way to the kitchen. I followed him, turning on lights as we went. We went right onto the memo pad on the counter where Mom and Dad always leave us notes. Nothing. The pad was blank. "We've got to find them," Josh cried. He sounded very frightened, his wide eyes reflecting his fear. "We have to get away from here." What if something has happened to them? That was what I started to say, but I caught myself just in time. I didn't want to scare Josh any more than he already was. Besides, he'd probably thought of that too. "Should we call the police?" he asked, as we walked back to the living room and peered out the front window into darkness. "I don't know," I said, pressing my hot forehead against the cool glass. "I just don't know what to do. I want them to be home. I want them here so we can all leave." "What's your hurry?" a girl's voice said from behind me. Josh and I both cried out and spun around. Karen Somerset was standing in the center of the room, her arms crossed over her chest. "But you're dead," I blurted out. She smiled, a sad smile, a bitter smile. And then 2 more kids stepped in from the hallway. One of them clicked off the lights. "Too bright in here," he said. They moved next to Karen. And another kid, Jerry Franklin, another dead kid, appeared by the fireplace. And I saw the girl with short black hair, the one I had seen on the stairs, move behind me by the curtain, besides the curtains. They were all smiling, their eyes glowing dully in the dim light, all moving in on Josh and me. "What do you want?" I screamed in a voice I didn't even recognize. "What are you going to do?" "We used to live in your house," Karen said softly. "Huh?" I cried. "We used to live in your house," George said. "And now, guess what?" Jerry added, "Now we're dead in your house." The others started to laugh, crackling, dry laughs, as they all closed in on me and Josh. Chapter 15. "They're going to kill us," Josh cried. I watched them move forward in silence. Josh and I backed up to the window. I looked around the dark room for an escape route, but there was nowhere to run. "Karen, you seemed so nice," I said. The words just tumbled out. I hadn't thought before I said them. Her eyes glowed a little brighter. "I was nice," she said in a glum monotone, "until I moved here." "We were all nice," George Carpenter said in the same lone monotone. "But now we're dead." "Let us go," Josh cried, raising his hands in front of him as if to shield himself. please, let us go." They laughed again, the dry, hoarse laughter, dead laughter. "Don't be scared, Amanda," Karen said. "Soon you'll be with us. That's why they invited you to this house." "Huh? I don't understand," I cried, my voice shaking. "This is the dead house. This is where everyone lives when they first arrive to Dark Falls, when they're still alive." This seemed to strike the others as funny. They all snickered and laughed. "But our great-uncle," Josh started. Karen shook her head, her eyes glowing with amusement. "No, sorry, Josh. No great-uncle. It was just a trick to bring you here. Once every year, someone new has to move here. Other years, it was us. We lived in this house until we died. This year, it's your turn." "We need new blood," Jerry Franklin said, his eyes glowing red in the dim light. "Once a year, you see, we need new blood." Moving forward in silence, they hovered over Josh and me. I took a deep breath, a last breath perhaps, and shut my eyes. And then I heard the knock on the door, a loud knock, repeated several times. I opened my eyes. The ghostly kids all vanished. The air smelled sour. Josh and I stared at each other, dazed, as the loud knocking started again. "It's Mom and Dad," Josh cried. We both ran to the door. Josh stumbled over the coffee table in the dark, so I got to the door first. "Mom, Dad," I cried, pulling open the door. "Where have you been?" I reached out my arms to hug them both and stopped with my arms in the air. My mouth dropped open and I uttered a silent cry. "Mr. Dawes?" Josh exclaimed, coming up beside me. "We thought—" "Oh, Mr. Dawes, I'm so glad to see you," I cried happily, pushing open the screen door for him. "Kids, you're okay?" he asked, eyeing us both, his handsome face tight with worry. "Oh, thank God," he cried. "I got here in time." "Mr. Dawes," I started, feeling so relieved I had tears in my eyes. He grabbed my arm. "There's no time to talk," he said, looking behind him to the street. I could see his car in the driveway. The engine was running. Only the parking lights were on. "I've got to get you kids out of here while there's still time." Josh and I started to follow him, then hesitated. What if Mr. Dawes was one of them? "Hurry," Mr. Dawes urged, holding open the screen door, gazing nervously out into the darkness. "I think we're in terrible danger." "But—" I started, staring into his frightened eyes, trying to decide if I could trust him. "I was at the party with your parents," Mr. Dawes said. "All of a sudden, they formed a circle, everyone, around your parents and me. They started to close in on us, just like when the kids started to close in on Josh and me, I thought. We broke through them and ran," Mr. Dawes said, glancing to the driveway behind him. "Somehow the three of us got away. Hurry, we've all got to get away from here. Now." "Josh, let's go," I urged. Then I turned to Mr. Dawes. "Where are Mom and Dad?" "Come on, I'll show you. They're safe for now, but I don't know for how long." We followed him out of the house and down the driveway to his car. The clouds had parted. A sliver of moon shone low in a pale early morning sky. "There's something wrong with this whole town," Mr. Dawes said, holding the front passenger door open for me as Josh climbed into the back. I slumped gratefully into the seat, and he slammed the door shut. "I know," I said as he slid behind the wheel. "Josh and we've got to get as far away as we can before they catch up with us," Mr. Dawes said, backing down the drive quickly, the tires sliding and squealing as he pulled onto the street. "Yes," I agreed. "Thank goodness you came. My house, it's filled with kids, dead kids, and—" "So you've seen them?" Mr. Dawes said softly, his eyes wide with fear. He pushed down harder on the gas pedal. As I looked out into the purple darkness, a low orange sun began to show over the green treetops. "Where are our parents?" I asked anxiously. "There's a kind of outdoor theater next to the cemetery," Mr. Dawes said, staring straight ahead through the windshield, his eyes narrow, his expression tense. "It's built right into the ground, and it's hidden by a big tree. I left them there. I told them not to move. I think they'll be safe. I don't think anyone will think to look there." "We've seen it," Josh said. A bright light suddenly flashed on the back seat. "What's that?" Mr. Dawes asked, looking into the rearview mirror. "My flashlight," Josh answered, clicking it off. "I brought it just in case. But the sun will be up soon. I probably won't need it." Mr. Dawes hit the brake and pulled the car to the side of the road. We were at the edge of the cemetery. I climbed quickly out of the car, eager to see my parents. The sky was still dark, streaked with violet now. The sun was a dark orange balloon, just barely poking over the trees. Across the street, beyond the jagged rows of gravestones, I could see the dark outline of the leaning tree that hid the mysterious amphitheater. "Hurry," Mr. Dawes urged, closing his car door quietly. "I'm sure your parents are desperate to see you." We headed across the street, half walking, half jogging, Josh swinging the flashlight in one hand. Suddenly, at the edge of the cemetery grass, Josh stopped. "Petey!" he cried. I followed his gaze and saw our white terrier walking slowly along the slope of gravestones. "Petey!" Josh called again and began running to the dog. My heart sank. I hadn't had a chance to tell Josh what Ray had revealed to me about Petey. "No, Josh," I called. Mr. Dawes looked very alarmed. "We don't have time. We have to hurry," he said to me. Then he began shouting for Josh to come back. "I'll go get him," I said, and took off, running as fast as I could along the rows of graves, calling to my brother. Josh, wait up, don't go after him. Josh, Petey is dead." Josh had been gaining on the dog, which was ambling along, sniffing the ground, not looking up, not paying attention to Josh. Then, suddenly, Josh tripped over a low grave marker. He cried out as he fell, and the flashlight flew out of his hand and clattered against a gravestone. I quickly caught up with him. "Josh, are you okay?" He was lying on his stomach, staring straight ahead. "Josh, answer me, are you okay?" I grabbed him by the shoulders and tried to pull him up, but he kept staring straight ahead, his mouth open, his eyes wide. "Josh? Look," he said finally. I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that Josh wasn't knocked out or something. "Look," he repeated, and pointed to the gravestone he had tripped over. I turned and squinted at the grave. I read the inscription, silently mouthing the words as I read. "Compton Dawes, rest in peace, 1950 through 1980. My head began to spin. I felt dizzy. I steadied myself, holding on to Josh. Compton Dawes. It wasn't his father or his grandfather. He had told us he was the only Compton in his family. So Mr. Dawes was dead too. Dead, dead, dead. Dead as everyone else. He was one of them. One of those dead ones. Josh and I stared at each other in the purple darkness, surrounded by dead. Now what? I asked myself. Now what?